Nintendo and Sega. They were the biggest rivals in the 90s. Nintendo with Mario, and Sega with Sonic. You would never see the two of them hanging out together.
What is that?
A Sonic game on a Nintendo console? What is this? Oh, Sega dropped out of the console business and just makes games now? Oh, okay.
Sonic Advance was the first Sonic game ever made on a Nintendo console. Well, that isn't completely true. Sonic Adventure 2, which was originally a Dreamcast game, made its way onto the GameCube as Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Sonic Advance and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle would be released on the exact same day in Japan. However, Sonic Advance is the first completely original game made for a Nintendo console, that being the Game Boy Advance. Sonic Advance would fully use the new design of Sonic and take inspiration from the current Sonic games released at the time for additions that weren't present in the Sega Genesis Sonic games. Sonic Advance has 4 playable characters: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles can do all the same moves you'd expect them to, but with some new additions. Sonic having this somersault and kick move, Tails having a tail whip, something he could do in Sonic Adventure, Knuckles being able to punch, something he could do in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, then finally Amy, who has never been playable in a 2D Sonic game before. She has the ability to use her hammer to either directly attack or launch herself in the air much higher than a normal jump. She can't turn into a ball at all, which leads to her feeling the most odd out of the 4. When she jumps, she doesn't turn into a ball, meaning she can get hit by things the other 3 wouldn't. This means she also can't spin dash. Instead, she just has this leap forward move, and this weird dive. So, if you don't have enough speed to make it up a ramp, or fully go through a loop, you gotta walk back to get a running start to build up speed. It reminds me a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog 1. To me, this makes her the hardest character in the game, and her moveset does make for an interesting way to play a Sonic game. Sonic and Amy can also grind on rails. I don't know, guess this is just a thing hedgehogs can do? A fox that can fly, and a echidna that can glide. Both of those are normal, but you'd never see them grinding on a rail. That is just unrealistic. The game kicks off with Neo Green Hill Zone, having both an Act 1 and an Act 2, with each having its own version of the level song. Neo Green Hill Zone is a grassy level next to water, very common for a Sonic game. The level plays well too, and is a very nice introduction level, and even for replaying the level, it's still interesting enough that running through it more than once isn't boring. Just very simple, but still very replayable. The level's boss is Eggman, who tries to mush you with a hammer. Pretty simple. The second zone is Secret Base Zone, and it can't be that secret if it's the second level. The level has a cool introduction part to start off Act 1, and once inside, it sure is a secret base. Just another simple level that's fun to go through. The boss is pretty lackluster for a level called Secret Base Zone. Just Eggman using a robotic pogo stick. Casino Paradise Zone is the third zone in the game. Sonic games like having casino levels, so it's not a surprise to see it in this game. It's just another good level. While the last boss was very simple and not much to it, this boss is the same, but worse. This is probably my least favorite boss in the game. There's just a lot of waiting around on this boss to get in a hit, without anything to do in between hits. Ice Mountain is the fourth zone, and it acts as the game's water level. Thankfully, it's a good one. The boss of Ice Mountain is just like Casino Paradise, just a lot of waiting around. Thankfully, it is more interesting than that boss, however, it still isn't the best. It's a boss that can't really easily damage you, however, it just wants to stall you underwater, so you run out of air. But for Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, this boss is pretty simple. Tails can just swim up for air, Knuckles can swim on the surface of water so getting air isn't an issue, and makes getting in hits easy, and Amy can easily just jump and hit Eggman no matter what, and if need be, just hammer jump up to get some air. But for Sonic, this boss can be pretty tough. Angel Island is the fifth zone, and this is where the game really kicks up the difficulty. The hardest part for me on this zone is the start of Act 2. Every time, I instantly just get up to speed, then proceed to fall off at this beginning area. I just consistently keep forgetting this bottomless pit is here, and every time I play Sonic Advance, I always fall into it. I played through the whole game 4 times recently using all the characters, so I'd hopefully remember about this bottomless pit one of the times. No, and no. The boss of this one is against Mecha Knuckles. He has all the normal Knuckles moves, like punching, gliding, shooting missiles, you know, the classics. Egg Rocket is the 6th zone, and is definitely the hardest in the game. Egg Rocket is only a single act, however, it is much longer than some whole zones. The whole level is very vertical, always wanting the player to keep climbing higher. In addition, early into the level, a 5-minute time limit is set. You will eventually hit sections of the level that reset the time limit back to 5 minutes, so it's not 5 minutes to beat the whole level, just 5 minutes to beat the section. Unlike all other levels, Egg Rocket is pretty linear, not having a ton of paths like the previous levels. There are some shortcuts here and there, but not as many. Because of the time limit and climbing up, the level is designed to have pits that have you fall off. But instead of just losing a life, you fall to an earlier section, so you have to redo it. This is where you really start to notice how common spikes are used and how a lot of them are just placed in random locations to make it harder, but most of them are just hard because they appear when you have zero warning. Spikes do appear on earlier levels, and on those levels, they can be a bit problematic, just running into them with no warning, but most of the time on the earlier levels, it's not as common, and the spots that have those spikes can potentially be avoided if you happen to take a different path. But on Egg Rocket, since the level is very linear, you will encounter almost every spike on the level. This part here is one of the most problematic parts in the game. So you have a spike that can disappear and reappear, not that bad. An enemy with projectiles, not that bad. An item and a spring. Obviously you just need to avoid the spikes and the enemy's projectiles and hit the spring. Okay, avoid both, hit the spring, and then boom, right into the spikes on the wall. These spikes have no business being here. The reason I hit them is because I didn't have enough speed when hitting the spring. Normally springs just send you where they want you to go, so needing to be at a certain speed is really weird. These spikes shouldn't even be here. If you want it to be you need enough speed, get rid of the spikes so you just have to hit the wall instead, so you still fall down, but you don't lose any rings. Then lower the platform up top so you can access it when you have enough speed, since the spikes act as a platform for when you do have enough speed. Or better yet, just have the spring not require speed and just send you up there. This level just has a lot of cheap ways to send you back to a lower area. When you get to this part, if you go left, you get to continue through the level. If you go right, you get sent to a lower area, but with a bonus item that helps you go through the area you just went through. This item can be obtained before you even go through that area. So going right is basically just a one-way ticket to having to redo the area again. Egg Rocket doesn't have a boss. After clearing it, you get sent to the next zone. Cosmic Angel Zone is the 7th and the last regular zone. Just like Egg Rocket, it's only a single act. The difficulty continues to get harder. This boss is the most frustrating in the game. You have to get pretty close to Eggman with a jump to cause him to flip over right side up, so you can hit him. But if you mess up, you can easily get hit if he doesn't flip over, or by any of the projectiles. What really adds to making this boss frustrating is how the ground you fight on isn't actually ground at all. So any rings you lose after getting hit just pass right through, which can lead to situations where you can easily lose all your rings and be unable to recover any of them. Even though I said Egg Rocket and Cosmic Angel are single act zones, which is true, the game considers them both as Zone 6, with Egg Rocket being Act 1 and Cosmic Angel being Act 2. So Cosmic Angel's boss can be seen as the boss for Egg Rocket. X Zone is the final zone of the game, being a boss rush of bosses, but instead of being bosses from Sonic Advance, It's a selection of bosses from the Sega Genesis Sonic games, then being a completely new boss. After defeating this boss, that's it. That's Sonic Advance. Well, not completely. This game does have one more boss to get the real ending, but we need the 7 Chaos Emeralds. They are obtainable in special stages. Special stages are accessed from jumping on a hidden special stage spring that are hidden across the main levels. There are 7 special stage springs throughout the whole game, 1 for each Chaos Emerald. It's 1 per zone, which doesn't seem so bad, except it's only 1 in a single act in that zone. Neo Green Hill Zone Act 1 has a special stage spring for Neo Green Hill Zone, but Act 2 doesn't have one. Secret Base Zone Act 2 has the special stage spring for Secret Base Zone, but Act 1 doesn't have one. It's almost a repeating pattern of the first act does, but the second act doesn't. Then the second act does, but the first act doesn't. Except Ice Mountain has a special stage spring on Act 1 and Act 2. Both are for different Chaos Emeralds. Since Egg Rocket doesn't have a special stage spring, and with Cosmic Angel being the next zone as the 7th zone, they had to put a special stage spring in another zone. With Egg Rocket having a time limit on it, and the way it's designed, it makes sense why they didn't want to have a special stage spring on it, but it's still interesting they decided to put it on Ice Mountain. The special stage has whichever character you're playing as on a board falling. The goal is to collect a required amount of rings. Once the required amount of rings is collected, the Chaos Emerald will be rewarded. These special stages are pretty neat. They try to make it look 3D, which looks cool, but sometimes it's hard to tell if you're directly above rings, which can lead to you missing rings at times. It's better than the special stages in Sonic 1, but I don't think it's better than the special stages in Sonic 2 and Sonic 3. The Chaos Emeralds are connected to the Sonic Advance save file as a whole, and doesn't care which characters you obtain them with. So if you got a few on each character, or just all 7 as Tails, it can still grant access to the real final boss. Moon Zone is the real final level of Sonic Advance. It requires you to be X Zone as Sonic and have collected all 7 Chaos Emeralds. The real final boss is fought as Super Sonic. This is a pretty cool final boss. This boss is tough at first, but once you figure out what you need to do to beat the boss, it becomes a lot easier. After beating this boss, the real ending plays. Is it worth the time to get all the Chaos Emeralds to get the real ending though? Hard to say. The reward for doing so is an extra boss and a different ending, which is pretty short. Unlike Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Sonic the Hedgehog 3, collecting all the Chaos Emeralds doesn't grant access to Super Sonic in regular levels, which is upsetting. Tiny Chow Garden is a sort of minigame that allows you to raise Chow. It has connectivity with Sonic Adventure DX and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the GameCube to move Chow to and from. Also, all the rings you collect throughout a playthrough get added to the ring count in the Tiny Chow Garden to be spent on items in the shop. Unfortunately, if you ever reset your save file ever, there is a bug that prevents rings from being earned. Fortunately, this bug was fixed with version 1.1 of Sonic Advance. Unfortunately, it was only released in Japan. Fortunately, Sonic Advance 1.1 would be the version that was in the Sonic Advance and Sonic Pinball Party double pack.
Sonic Advance is a really important Sonic game for being the first Sonic game on a Nintendo console, and it was a solid one to start with. But the game isn't just worth talking about because it's the first Sonic game on a Nintendo console. It's just a great Sonic game.